Welcome to the Wrestling Philosophy Show, where we talk to the wrestling community about their perspectives, beliefs, and techniques in the sport. In episode 14, we connect with one of the most influential and behind-the-scenes figures in NCAA wrestling. Coach Beaschler talks about how playing football in college led him to coaching at Ohio Northern University. Over the years, he's been involved with the NWCA, the Rules Committee, and the OPC. He discusses how close the NCAA was to shutting down wrestling during the 1997-98 season and shares stories of his trip to Washington, D.C. with Dan Gable. Thank you, Coach Beaschler, for your time and insight. You can find this video show and past episodes on YouTube, or if you're more of the audio type, head over to your favorite podcast platforms. How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing well, Jared.
Yeah, where are you joining us from tonight?
I'm at the office, kind of where you'll find me just about any night of the week. I, try to take some weekends here and there, but I'm a creature of habit. And when work needs to be done, I do it in the office. I can't work from home.
Yeah, no, that works. So you say you got some study tables tonight?
Yep, got our freshmen in study table. They're always in there Monday and Wednesday nights from 7:30 to 9:30, trying to teach them how to be successful in college on the academic side of things. So part of that is teaching them to sit down each night and just do what the professor asks you to do. It's really not that hard.
Right. So give us a little breakdown how you ended up there and, the story behind that, because you've been there, since the mid-'80s?
Fall of 86.
Okay.
Actually, my parents dropped me off as a college freshman here in 1982, and I like to joke that my dad gave me one piece of advice when he dropped me off. He said, "Son, you stay there till we come back and get you." And now it's 2020, and they've never come back to get me, so I'm still here. It didn't quite happen that way, but, I got into coaching kind of unexpectedly. I didn't have plans on being a coach or anything, and basically graduated from college not really knowing what I wanted to do yet. And I had a lady who was the department chair at the time who was a great mentor to me and remained that over the years, by the name of Dr. Janet Kittle. And actually she was even at Kent State for a while as associate AD. I don't know if she would have been there when your brothers and you and stuff were there, but anyway, she kind of talked me into staying and working on my master's degree and said, "Why don't you coach? It'll pay for your master's degree. And then 2 years later, you'll know what you want to do." And I think I started coaching, and 2 weeks later, I was like, wow, why didn't I ever think of this before? And, 32 years later, I'm still doing it. So she always said she had to hit me upside the head with a 2x4 to get me to see what was right in front of me that I couldn't see.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And you played football there? Is that kind of how it works?
I did wrestle in college. Played football for 4 years, and I never got wrestling out of my blood. Loved the sport, loved playing football as well. But high school, my senior year, that's back in the days when cutting weight was real cutting weight, and lost too much weight my senior year. I basically was starving myself to death. Got an ulcer halfway through the year over the Christmas break, and didn't know I had that, didn't know what was wrong, went to the doctor, and this is the same doctor that delivered me. And he said, "You're starving yourself. I'm going to put you in the hospital." And I got up and walked out and said, "No, you're not. I'm undefeated right now, and that ain't going to change." So I was a little bullheaded and stubborn maybe in those days. And just like any time when you cut too much weight, especially cutting that much weight, the season didn't exactly end well on a positive note. But the problem was after that, I could never lose weight. I couldn't gain weight. I couldn't lose weight. Until I was probably about 45 years old, my weight stayed at 176 no matter what. I could eat anything I wanted, or I could not eat for 3 days and I'd weigh 176. And back in those days in college, you had to cut weight. It's just, I couldn't have just wrestled at my natural weight, and kind of ended the career that way. But I never got wrestling out of my blood. And then when I started coaching, it was a position where it was a graduate assistant with football, but assistant football coach at the time was the head wrestling coach, the name of Jeff Quinn. He's actually offensive line coach at Notre Dame now. So he wanted some help, and I was like, sure, I'll help with wrestling. And, so I was basically a graduate assistant for football and wrestling for 2.5 years before I was able to get a full-time position, and that just happened. I was at the right place at the right time, and then he left and took a job up at Grand Valley State, Division II school, and that was in the middle of the season. It would have been January 1st of '89. I was the interim head coach at 25 years old. So
Wow.
Here again, I was at the right place at the right time, and Vinny Cameron ended up winning his national title that year. He was our second national champ. Darren Scott had won the national title in '86, my first year as an assistant coach. So my first year as an assistant coach, I'm sitting in the corner of the national championship. We have a national champ. My first year as the head coach, I'm sitting in the corner with a national champ. And I said, boy, this coaching stuff's not that hard. And it was 23 years later before I had another national champ. So, reality sets in real quick sometimes. So, but
that's cool. That first year, right? National champ. That's crazy.
I had no idea what I was doing.
Hey, you gotta learn. Yeah. So how did you learn? I mean, never really coaching wrestling or competing in wrestling in college. How did you make that transition? Just, what resources did you use?
Well, I never really got away from wrestling. Even when I was in college, there was a guy a couple years older than me that I played football with that helped coach over at Bluffton High School. And he'd want guys to go along to work out with their guys. So I'd go over and I'd work out with them sometimes. I'd go into Northern's room and wrestle around with those guys sometimes. Dick West was the coach at the time, who was also my defensive coordinator. And he was always like, now, why again aren't you wrestling? I said, Coach, I can't lose weight. I just physically, I couldn't do it. So I'd go in there and roll around. And he actually got me to take his officiating class, and then I would keep score. I'd be the head scorer at the ONU Invitational, which I've ran for the last 32 years, but never knew at the time as I'm sitting at that table. And that was a long time before computers. That's when you had that big piece of paper, and you had all the weights down one side and all the teams across the other, and you put 1 point, 2 points, half point, 3/4 points, and you had to add them all up, and coaches would leave you alone until you get to the finals, and then you had 4 coaches up there all the time. Now, how many points do we got? You sure that's how many we got? And now with computers, you push a button, and there's your team score. So no one questions it either. Back in those days, they were all questioning my math.
You touched on cutting weight, and obviously for those on the fringe don't know how involved you really are in the sport. I guess you're one of the key pieces to the OPC. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say I'm one of the key pieces. I got involved with the championships committee as a member of that, as a coach. And back in those days, and this would have been probably around 2001 or so, a couple years after we had the deaths and they started the OPC, and it was kind of in its infancy. And it was the committee that was trying to come up with the rules and everything. And I don't know, I just seemed to kind of have an interest in it. So I helped write the rules and things for the OPC, and worked closely with Pat Tossi at the National Wrestling Coaches Association, who he's really the one that came up with the OPC and computer side of it and everything. Him and I would always be bouncing ideas back and forth of, how to make sure that there was integrity in it, and, the rules applied equally and fairly, and it did what we wanted it to do. And the main focus was always the safety of the athletes. And I don't think people realize how close the NCAA came to shutting our sport down when we had those 3 deaths. That was
98, correct?
97, 98, right in there.
Right. Because NCAA Division I were in Cleveland, I believe. And that was
there was a couple days that they were meeting with the NCAA. The committee was that it was touch and go whether we were going to have NCAA wrestling ever again or not. And most people don't realize that. But
wow, I did not know that. Know that.
You talk to the guys that were on the committee at the time, and they were walking out of there fearful that we may not be able to save the sport.
Wow. So any other story, what they added, was it 7 pounds or 10 pounds instantly?
They added 7 pounds to each weight class. And that was just to get through the first year so that nobody wasn't losing any more weight than, they were probably all losing more than 7 pounds. But they just added 7 pounds to each weight class and ended up staying with that. And my understanding how they came up with that was a study done in the Army in 1940 something or 50s. That was the only study they had of what males' range of weight would be. And they've stuck with those. They seem to work pretty well. I mean, you always hear somebody doesn't like it, but I think it's served us pretty well over the years. But the OPC, in my opinion, is one of the best things that's happened to collegiate wrestling.
Yeah, because I mean, I was getting into college at that point, so it was new at that point. So it was kind of all very new. And then I get back into coaching, and what we got to do is from the coaching side of it. But yeah, I remember that in '98 sitting, at the NCAA's in Cleveland there, and the weights and all, the discussions. But I never heard that. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Any other stories with that, or how changes you made maybe along the way, or anything?
I don't know if there's really stories. The changes all kind of happen naturally, or to make sure that there was integrity, and to make sure that the athlete trainers got involved to make sure it was done correctly, and coaches not being able to manipulate it. And I mean, that's the thing. At that time, we had to have a program that the NCAA felt comfortable with, that could not be manipulated by coaches, because we could not afford another death. And, the thing about it is, as I've looked at that over the years, it wasn't the weight loss that I think that killed those three young men. They were all three. The only other common denominator was they all three were also on creatine.
Correct. Right. I heard that.
Yeah. And I don't know.
And that was new at that time too, right?
That was new. And boy, you took this and it was natural. Your body produced it. Wow, look at these muscles you had. And, here again, anytime you're messing with anything that the body does, you probably ought to leave it alone, let it do its own course. But I really think, and I'm not a scientist and I couldn't prove any of this, but I don't think the weight loss killed them. I don't think the creatine killed them. It was a combination of the weight loss, dehydrating themselves while they were on creatine, because creatine takes water out of your body and puts it into the muscles. That's why you develop more. So it kind of naturally dehydrates you to begin with, and then you added weight loss on top of it.
Right, because saunas were still legal at that point. Is that right? And so
saunas were legal until
the body was fighting two beasts in a way. Then you're trying to hold on and trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, because you look for 60 years before that. Not that there was any kind of rationale to weight loss or anything good. I could tell you stories of things I saw at the NCAA Nationals, the night of the first night of the tournament. Okay, anybody that's left was an All-American. All they had to do was make weight that night. You weighed out the night before, and if you didn't make it, you had to weigh in at 7:30 in the morning, and no one wanted to go all night long. But some of the things I saw going on in those rooms, cutting weight, and as wrestlers or coaches, we didn't think anything of it. If a psychiatrist walked into that room, they would have had us all institutionalized for what we were doing in there.
And there was a 24-hour weigh-in, right? So that even made it more incentive, right?
You would weigh in the night before. I mean, every guy would lose 15 pounds and then weigh in, and then it all gained 12 back. So I mean, and that's the thing I look at now. It was really stupid, to be honest, because you all weighed 12 pounds more the next day.
Right. So you're on the same boat regardless. So everyone's going through torture for no reason.
Why did we lose all that weight? Why don't we just say, let's just lose 5 pounds, and you're still wrestling the same guy. It didn't change anything, but we just know so much more now about nutrition and hydration and everything you need to compete. And that's where that's why I say, not only is it safer, but the wrestling's better now because you work and practice on technique. Back in those days before the weight management program, you might work technique on a Monday because the guys were all 15 pounds overweight and they felt good. But then by Tuesday, they're thinking, I got to get 6 off today. I got to get 6 off tomorrow. And the practices were just designed to cut weight. Just keep them moving, wrestle live, jump rope, have the furnace turned up to 90 degrees. And it really wasn't about making yourself a better wrestler. It was all about making weight. That's what the sport was. Boy, you got some hard, mean sons of guns out on the mat because you cut that weight, man, you weren't going to lose. I mean, there was a mentality that I think we also maybe lost a little bit from our sport, but I think that was a good trade-off.
Yeah. No, it's at the other end of the spectrum, being involved the youth scene in Ohio here, we did some changes. I still think we can make a few more, but one, in that note about taking the weight loss out of it, we changed a few years ago. We'd allow them to show up at a district or state tournament and, run the weight off just like in the old days. Well, we change it very similar to the high school where they show up, you get you get your 2 steps on each scale. And if you don't make it, you're going home. And, when parents are paying the money and traveling, they're not trying to, suck little Johnny down to the next weight, they're, all right, we're going to wrestle what you weigh. And then at state, you get a pound, but then you got to weigh it on Sunday. And, some of these new parents don't understand that. Okay. Well, he made weight. Like, well, he's got to, he's not going to wrestle optimally, all weekend if, he's got to, make weight, weigh in Friday night and then wrestle.
Yeah.
And then, so it's, trying to teach them at a young age. Okay. That, I guess the parents more so, you wrestle what you weigh and, don't.
And that's hard when you get parents who grew up doing it the other way.
Right. Or even new to the sport and they're hearing, these horror stories of other people doing, the rumors or whatever they're doing. So,
sport should just be about having fun and learning the sport and loving the sport. That's the youth. The youth is where you fall in love with the sport.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of those kids, parents push them and have them cutting weight and all that. You know what? The kid's going to grow up hating wrestling. He'll probably grow up hating his dad too.
Right. Real quick. More often than not.
Yeah, so let them have fun. The competition will come later. You get in high school, then it gets competitive. But, youth sports, those kids, you know what? They just want to know where the next candy bar is after that match.
Right. Right. Go out with their teammates and get pizza or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I've always said youth sports, the parents should have to just stay in the car, drop the kids off, let them come in, wrestle. No mom and dad's allowed. It'd probably be better.
It might look like that this year if we do with
video
streaming only or something.
Maybe we can use COVID to our advantage here at youth sports.
Yeah. So were you part of the Coaches Association then? Is that how you got kind of involved with the OPC or how did
Yeah, I was probably involved with the Coaches Association before I got on the NCAA committee. To be honest, I can't remember which one I did first. But, I remember how I got involved with the Coach Association. That was, I'd coached for a year or two and wanted to be involved and wanted to help the sport. And I remember asking a couple of the veteran coaches who were the officers for the Division III Coach Association, kind of, how do you get involved with this? And one of them goes, well, you need to start off being the historian. Oh. I'm like, okay, what's that? He goes, I'll send some stuff to you. So he said, I get this crate. I mean, it was a wooden crate about 6-8 inches deep by about probably 3 feet wide and 4 feet high. Okay. And I had to get a crowbar and open it. And there was these big posters and this metal thing. I kind of just closed it up and said, what is that? He goes, well, that's the history of Division III wrestling. We used to set it up every year at nationals. You need to hang on to that. Well, that was like 32 years ago. And a year ago, I got it out of the closet and actually opened it up to see what was in it.
Really?
It was really cool because it was like, when you go to Walmart or whatever and those display things, they have posters on that you can, open it and slide. It was one of those, but it had pictures from national championships in Division III back from the 70s up to 86 or 87 in those days. And that, with me looking at that a year ago, those were coaches that were winning the national titles that were the men. When I started it, I was like, wow, there's a guy Dave Eisenhower and Don Murray. And Don Murray's still coaching at Brockport. He's coached for almost 50 years now. And I was the only one that could pick him out in that picture. I said, that's Don Murray with hair,
right.
But I wanted to make sure that got to the right place. So that is now out at the NWCA national office.
Cool.
I didn't want that getting lost because it was Jeff Swenson. When he won his first national title at Augsburg, to picture him and the team. It had the pictures of the outstanding wrestler from those years. I mean, it was a really cool time capsule that had sat down in my storage area for 30 years because I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't even know what was in it.
In your hand.
Open it.
Good thing it ended up in your hands. Who knows where it could end up or could have
some
lost.
of those things, it gets lost. And and that's when I called the NWCA. I said, I want to know what you're going to do with it, because if it's just going to get thrown in a closet somewhere, I want it preserved, because that's a history of Division III wrestling. And now everything's recorded electronically and everything. You're not going to lose that. But these are photos The one was Dave Eisenhower from college in New Jersey, who was a great mentor of mine, passed away a few years ago. And the one picture was when they won the national title, and he is holding his son David, who was maybe a year or two old. And I remember watching David be an All-American for Isaac College in New Jersey when he got to college. So it was a neat collage of the history. And I don't know, I enjoyed looking at it all and kind of hated to give it up because I was like, I'm the only one who knows who some of these people are anymore. So, but it's in the right place right now.
No, that's cool. So at one point you were the president of all the Coaches Association for all divisions, correct?
Correct.
How's a Division III coach right now? There's one for each division, right?
Yep.
Well, how's a Division III coach get to be, overseeing, president of all the divisions?
There's a good story that goes with that.
Okay.
I got involved with the Coaches Association, and here again, it was at a time where, Division II and III kind of did their own thing because they didn't feel like Division I really cared anything about it. A lot of your D1 coaches really didn't want anything to do with it. Bob Bubb, who's a longtime secretary rules editor for the wrestling, who did the rule book for probably close to 30 years. He was the Clarion coach back in the day when they were heyday. And he retired. He ran the NWCA, the National Wrestling Coaches Association, out of his garage.
Oh, wow.
And I remember being at a convention in Dallas, Texas, and we were on the board, and they made the decision that we needed an executive director if we ever wanted this to go forward. We couldn't keep running it out of a guy's garage, and Bob did a phenomenal job running it, but if, he didn't have time to raise money and do everything if you really want to go to the next level. And that's when they hired Mike Moyer, who's still in that position. And if you know anything about Mike Moyer, once Mike gets his hooks in you, man, he don't let go. It seemed like he was always talking to me into something else. And I remember we would go out. I was the president of Division III Coaches Association, and then because of that, I was on the board of the NWCA overall, and that also put me on the executive board of directors. And I remember we were at a meeting out in Manheim, Pennsylvania with the executive board, so there's like 8-10 of us in the room. And for some reason, they had me sit at the far end of the table. I don't know why. Somebody just, hey, go down there and sit. So I sat. Well, they had cooked up the idea they wanted me to be the next president, and the current president backed his chair up against the door so that no one could get out and said, well, we're going to stay here till you say yes. So wow. I kind of didn't have a choice, but it was an honor. I mean, it really was. It was a great experience trying to help wrestling. I remember one of our conference calls one night was we'd started the NWCA online.com website. And we had a company that wanted to buy it from us and run it. And I remember that night talking about the pros and cons, and we were close to maybe, hey, let's dump this off, get some money for it, let them run it. And we decided that probably wouldn't be a good idea, and we stayed with it. And now I see what it's morphed into. That would have been the biggest mistake we ever made if we did that.
Cool.
And then there was, when I was president, that's when Denny Hassert was a Speaker of the House. And Mike Moyer had set up for me, him, Dan Gable to go to the Capitol building with some of the big fundraising guys, the NWCA. And Denny Hassert was going to host us at the Capitol building in his private dining room when he was Speaker of the House. I can't ever thank Mike Moyer enough for that experience. That was the coolest thing for a little farm boy from McConnellville, Ohio.
Right.
To even be the president of the NWCA, and then I'm sitting in the Capitol building. But Mike Moyer, as we're getting ready for this dinner, because you're not allowed to fundraise in a federal building, so there was no fundraising going on. We weren't talking about that. But he was going to have Denny Hassert talk to these guys. He was going to have Dan Gable talk to these guys, and I thought I was just along for the ride. Okay, well, about 10 minutes before we assembled for the dinner, Mike Moyer goes, oh, by the way, I didn't want to make you nervous, but after Denny Hassert's done talking, I want you to say a few words, and then I'll have Dan Gable go. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I say, you want me to follow the Speaker of the House of Representatives sandwiched in between Dan Gable? I was like, I have never forgiven Mike Moyer for that.
Wow.
I don't even know what I said. I'm just sitting there like, I mean, and Denny Hassert, I mean, he's a politician. He just got up, started talking. It just rolled right off.
Naturally.
Yeah, and then you got Gable, that's who everybody wanted to hear anyway. I mean, you hang on every word Dan Gable says, and then you had little old me in the middle, and I'm sitting there like,
Wow.
what were you thinking, man? I still haven't forgiven him for that one, man. So,
Wow.
but it was a neat experience. I mean, Denny Hassert took us up to his office out on the balcony that looks down the mall. It was about 9:30 at night. All of us, he gave us a personal tour of the Capitol building. And when you walk around the Capitol building with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, security guards, and everybody, just say, "Good evening, sir," to Denny Hassert, and you just followed him around.
Wow.
He actually took us into the chambers where the House, you see on TV where they meet. You ever watch when the president comes in, the doors on the side, they always bring him in from the left. We stood on the other side of that door. When he gave us a tour, and I'm sitting there like, I'm standing where, JFK and, I mean, you name the president.
Everybody, yeah.
Here, and I'm like, little me. I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store, man.
That's cool.
But I remember being out on the balcony, standing beside Dan Gable.
We're looking. You have any Dan Gable stories?
Oh yeah, there's my one Dan Gable story. Okay. We're looking down the mall on the Speaker's personal balcony that looks down the mall, 9:30 at night. Okay. You don't have cell phone cameras in those days and stuff. Had cell phones, but I don't think they had cameras on them. But I'm standing there just in awe. And I turned to Coach Gable. I said, "Coach," I said, you've been all over the world for wrestling, but you can't probably have ever been to too many places that's a better sight than this." Mm-hmm. Without hesitation, he turned to me and goes, "Yeah, this is great, but it's still not better than a gym full of wrestling mats." And right there, I figured out why he won 17 national titles and I've never won one. I didn't know what to say to him. I'm just like, I'm in awe of this. And he's still thinking, yeah, it's still not better than a wrestling, gym full of wrestling mats.
Wow. That's pretty cool. That's real cool. Takes you all the way there. And obviously then spending time with him. I know you do a ton. Everyone knows you do a ton for the sport, don't get all the credit you deserve, and probably because how modest you are. Going back in that room when they decide, to pick you as president, what do you think they saw in you, or I guess some of the reasons?
I always assumed they couldn't get anybody else to do it.
Nah.
So, I don't know. I remember Mike Moyer talking to me, and before we had that meeting, him and I went out for lunch or whatever, and he was saying, we need to find a new president. You got anybody in mind? I said, well, I really think it needs to be a D1 guy. We need to raise money. We need that guy that will, has the notoriety and, and all that, and wasn't ever thinking me. But I think they decided at the time we just need somebody that would work hard and keep things going forward. And, you're the president of it, but you still got the board. They're making the decisions. Right. It's not like the president. I mean, it serves a role, but, I think it's still Mike Moyer. He's the unsung hero for what he has done for that organization. I mean, he is a tireless worker, raising money. Has really taken that from, I remember we probably had a $30,000, $40,000 budget, and it's a several $1 million budget now.
Wow. That's awesome.
The way I've seen that organization grow and just do the great things it does, not just the OPC, but, adding more wrestling programs, the coaches' education, the leadership program, everything that's morphed into. And it's humbling when I think back to, one night sitting in my office, we almost, sold the NWCA online.com to some company to run. And what Mike Moyer's the driving force, him, Pat Tossi, they've been there from the beginning. And those are two guys that do not get enough credit. That I think they both belong in the Wrestling Hall of Fame for what they have done for wrestling. I mean, Pat Tossi put together that whole OPC and runs it, and he does all the data and everything now for the D1, for their qualifiers, determining, who gets bids and everything. He knows that system inside and out. He's developed it. Just him and Mike both. I could never give them enough credit for what they've done to this sport. I don't really think I've done much when I compare to those two guys.
Everyone who knows you wouldn't take any credit for any much of anything. But no. So you're involved also with the rules, right? Rules committee and things like that.
Right now, I'm not. I'm not on the.
Okay.
Well, several years ago, early in the early days, the rules committee and championships committee were the same committee.
Okay.
And here, probably I don't know, 8 years ago or so, maybe they split. The NCAA split to two committees. It was too much for one committee to run all the championships as well as the rules, and that's how most sports were. They had separate. So I was on the rules committee for several years, and then I served as the secretary rules editor, which was replacing Bob Bubb for a 4-year term, which basically is you interpret the rule book and write the new rules that the committee wants. But currently, I sit on the Division III Championships Committee, which our responsibility is to run the NCAA championships in Division III.
Okay. Little known fact, I don't even know if it's still in there, but for some reason when I was at Kent, they took pictures for the rule book, and I was in there for a few years, like a legal hammer lock or something.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know why, but
That was Bob Bubb, who I mentioned earlier, who was the secretary rules editor for had to be 25 years, if not 30. Bob did it a long time. But Pat McCormick from the 70s, he was the national coordinator of officials for about that same period of time. Here again, they were just guys who volunteered to kind of do it. And then it kind of morphed into, the job that it is now. But
Gotcha.
they had a connection. Somehow they started to do the videos when they do them on the VHS tapes and everything at Kent State. So for quite a few years, and that's even when I was before I was secretary rules editor, I was the NCAA weight management liaison. Because after we started creating the rules and everything, my term on the committee ended. And it was kind of like, all right, you're the only one on the committee that kind of knows all these rules, and there's still more work to do. So the NCAA tagged the title on me of liaison for the weight management program, and I did that up through my term as the secretary rules editor. And then it just made sense. Chuck Barbie's the secretary rules editor now, and to have two people interpreting different parts of the rule book didn't make sense. So that is now fallen under him with that. But yeah, I spent several days over at Kent State filming and editing and
Coach Romano just said show up, and I think there was 3 of us, and we were doing like the hammer lock and stuff like that. I remember, and vaguely remember it, but every once in a while the picture pops up and I see it, I'm like, oh, that's
clean shaven, because we couldn't go video with guys with beards and everything on. There was one guy that had to run back to the dorm room and shave real quick.
It might have been me, I don't remember, but being involved with the rules and the OPC, I guess, and I know, it takes long discussions on those things, and, they're long and thought out. Anything you personally would like to see changed from the rules or the weight management piece?
Weight management, I don't. I know some, they've always complained about the specific gravity of 1.020, but and is that very hydrated? Yes, it is, but I haven't seen anybody not be able to pass that test yet that wasn't already trying to lose too much weight, and they probably shouldn't be trying to go down that low. So I think we've all settled in with that and understand here's what you need to do. So I don't think I'd make changes on the weight management. They've relaxed it a little bit, which I think's okay because we have things under control now than what we did. We had to change a culture. I mean, anytime you're changing a culture, that's never easy. And I think that culture's changed where we embrace the weight loss a little bit better and getting guys in the right weight class where you can perform and you're hydrated and you have nutrition and, you're getting sleep and, the things you need to perform. But on the rules side of things, I'd like to see, I think we're in a good place right now in collegiate wrestling. The drop-down rule, the neutral out-of-bounds stalling call, those were all things that when I was secretary of rules editor, the rules committee put in that I think have really been positive for the sport. I think we took a chance when we went with a 4-point near fall, but I think that's turned out real well. I know when you had Nathan Shearer on here a while ago, he mentioned the 3-point takedown to the 1-point escape. I don't know about that one. I wouldn't mind them trying that for like 1 year as an experimental rule, which you can do. You don't see them do it often, but I would like to see it just to see how it would affect. I don't want to give up neutral wrestling or mat wrestling. That's why I like the 4-point near fall. I think that has brought more mat wrestling back into collegiate wrestling. The whole goal is not just to take guys down and let them up. The goal is to pin your opponent. And it's hard to do that if you're not on the mat. And, you can get back in a match real quick with a 4-point near fall.
Yeah.
So you
or
never
put it away, right? Put it away.
Put it away, or the guy can get back in. It works both ways. But I think that's made it more exciting. But I wouldn't mind seeing them experiment with a 3-point
first takedown. The first takedown's 3 points.
Nah, I don't like the first thing. It's either all 3 or none 3.
Okay.
Well, and here's one thing we talked about when I was on the committee. Actually, it was Jeff Swenson that brought it up. He'd recently gotten married, and his wife didn't know anything about wrestling. And she came to a dual meet, and he explained the scoring and everything for dual meet, 6 points for a pin, and major decisions. Okay, I got this down. So she's like, okay, this isn't that hard. I understand this. And then she went to a tournament. And she's like, what do you mean 1 point advanced? You get 2 points for a pin.
Right.
It happened to 6 points. And we actually talked about switching the tournament scoring to match dual meet scoring. So if
it's all relative, what's the difference, right?
Well, when you start, where it really gets a little bit scary but iffy is when you start figuring in placement points. Because with the 6-point pin, the way the structure is now, you could actually come back and get third and get pins, and you'd score more team points than the guy who won the tournament. So you could adjust the scoring stuff, but we talked pretty serious about it one year, but didn't do anything. As far as I know, they haven't went back to that. But the whole premise the 1 year on the committee, and this is why we went to part of the 4-point near fall, was a 2 count is 2 points, a 4 count, 4 points, make it easy for the fans. Right. And wrestling fans know it, but how do we attract new fans? You sit somebody down and start explaining scoring and wrestling, and it was 2 points for a 2 count, 3 points for a 5 count, or what.
Right.
It's too confusing. So we kind of got on it. Let's try to simplify it to make it easier to understand, and I think that's a concept to stick with.
That's kind of the conversation I've been having with some of these coaches. Trying to keep the rules simple, just from a coach, from an official standpoint. I know with the youth and high school level, it's sometimes hard finding officials. If you make it too hard on them, then the changes. Okay,
collegiate level, we don't have enough officials, and the officials we have are all getting at an upper level age. I'd like to say, up around my age, to where we've got to get younger officials in. I mean, we need to start grooming guys, and I agree. Young alums that I've talked to about, hey, why don't you get into officiating? Your wrestling career is over. You got a job, but it's hard when you first start your first job and get married, and have a kid or two, and I mean it's tough.
I agree. I think this whole COVID situation, it's going to have a big unintended consequence with some of these officials. What's put on them with the restrictions or whatever going on, and at the age. I think it's almost a marketing piece though too. I think. You
want to get out of the house during COVID, become an official.
No, I think a marketing piece in the sense of, no, it's a sport, right, where you have the dad and son kind of growing up together, and the dad coaches them for so long, up to high school, and I think there's a way, then when the kid's done wrestling, that's a way for them to kind of still be involved in the sport. I know a few few officials that are a father-son combo, and they travel and do high school tournaments. And it's like, they get to spend time together, learn from each other, and spend quality time. And I think there's a lot of father-son combos out there that I think they would do a good job officiating. And like you said, that first job, it's you got to have some tough skin, and you got to know you're not going to be right all the time. And how do you learn? And
we're back to talking about people in the stands now is what will chase a lot of them out, because you got some fans that don't know what they're talking about. They scream and yell at officials, and sometimes I look at officials and like, why would you want to go out and do that?
Right.
And some coaches, officials don't try to make bad calls, but the officials aren't going to be perfect every time. I'm not perfect every time coaching in the corner. My athletes aren't perfect every time out on the mat. Why do we think an official is going to be perfect? Now, they need to be perfect, but you know what? It's not going to be perfect. And that's something I learned real young. Bob Triano, longtime official, officiated the D1 Nationals quite a few years out of Columbus. And as a young coach, him and Chris Ford, who prior to officiating was Ohio State's head coach before Russ Hellickson. And they used to come to the ONU tournament and officiated. I had D1 officials doing the ONU Invitational.
Nice.
And those two guys pulled a young coach aside and said, this isn't how you coach. This is how you deal with officials. This is how you talk to officials. You know, taught me that you have respect for the officials. You say what you need to say, and then shut up, move on. I don't berate officials. I make a point and I be quiet. Okay. Right. And I've seen a lot of coaches who just scream and yell at officials, and they spend the whole match yelling at the official, not coaching their kid.
Right.
You're yelling at the official. You're not coaching your kid. Coach your kid. Okay. Right. I haven't seen an official change a call yet.
Right.
Once they make it.
Might be counterproductive too, right? You know, they're getting chirped on by a coach. It's, you know, they're not going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and it's about what you teach your kids too. I tell my guys, like, listen, you know what? You put yourself in a situation for the official to make a bad call. You put yourself in that situation. Don't put yourself in that situation. Right. You know, score enough points, the official can blow a call, and it ain't going to affect the match. Right. So that's easier said than done sometimes, but
yeah, I think emotions evolved, right?
Yeah, and I think over my career, you know, I've gotten calls that we shouldn't have gotten, but we've also gotten calls that you know, the other way around too. So I figure over my career, I'm probably breaking even. So some have went my way, some have went, you know, against us, but, you know, at the end of the day, I'm probably sitting 50-50. So
cool. You touched on the culture change, you know, with the OPC and the weight cutting, and obviously right now, girls wrestling is really, you know, booming. You know, do you have thoughts on that, and maybe, you know, when that culture change, you know, what's that tipping point to, you know, really make a big difference in the girls' sport and where it needs to be?
Well, I think, you know, that goes back when I was president of the Coaches Association. That's when some coaches, because of Title IX, were saying we need to start women's wrestling. But then you had other coaches saying that'll put us to death because, you know, they're going to add women's sport, you know, add women in there, and then they're going to get rid of more men. You know, I mean, you always have that point counterpoint. But I remember talking with Mike Moyer, and my comment was that as a Coaches Association, we needed to embrace women wrestling. I remember back when soccer got started, women did soccer, girls wanted to play soccer, but there weren't enough girls to do it, so they played with the boys. And I said, that's what's going to have to happen in wrestling. Until we get enough girls to say they want to wrestle, they're going to have to wrestle with the guys. And yes, I know that creates issues sometimes, but that's kind of the growing pains I think we had to go through. But I remember telling Mike Moyer, if we're smart as a coaches association, we will embrace this. And we will make sure we bring them into the NWCA as one of us. And my reasoning was I watched the national, the Men's Basketball Coaches Association, but then they have a Women's Basketball Coaches Association, and they're both fighting for the same resources. Okay? And I said, that's the last thing we need for wrestling is to where if we don't embrace this, somebody's going to start it. They're going to start their own Women's Wrestling Coaches Association, and maybe someday that will happen. But you know what? I think both sides will win more if we are all one Coaches Association and we can all get the same resources for the sport of wrestling, not fighting between women's wrestling and men's wrestling, fighting for the resources, because there's only so many resources out there for each sport. And if, you know, why create an enemy? I'm more, let's build a bridge and work together, and then we'll all gain in that. And then that's where I've seen it going. Mike Moyer here again been instrumental in starting men's program and women's program. The NCAA's recognized women's wrestling as an emerging sport. The tipping point, I'm not sure, you know, we might be past the tipping point and it's on its way to go.
Right. No, I just mean, you know, as far as it, you know, being here and, you know, make, you know, at all levels, I guess, and, you know, seeing it on the big stage, you know, alongside the men, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what I'm, yeah. So
no, I think in our lifetime, we're, you know, will the NCAA run a separate tournament? Will they combine them at some point in time, run them together? I don't know that, but
Right.
I think even now the number of girls wrestling in high school, it keeps growing every year. You're getting college programs. I almost worry that we're adding women's college programs faster than we have enough women that want to wrestle in college. But that's a delicate balance. So, because a lot of that's being enrollment driven, schools want more enrollment. So we'll start a wrestling program. But actually 2 years ago at the NWCA convention, I attended a session on women's wrestling because I have no experience on it. I've never dealt with it. And my point to go was some point my president might call me and say, Coach, I want to talk to you about women's wrestling. What do you know? And I'm going to say, I don't know anything. I don't want to have that conversation with my president. So I went and listened and, how to get a program started, things you need to be aware of. You do have an issue if you have a male coach with females. In some sports, you don't have the contact, but, name one wrestling coach that hasn't gotten down on the mat with his male wrestlers and shown moves to and everything.
Right.
In women, that may not be a good idea. Somebody walk in, somebody accuse. It's going to be different. We have to be smart about it, but I think it's good for our sport of wrestling.
Right. 100% agree. So, Nate wanted me to ask if you have any memories of going back to the SBC tournament with him. Do you remember going to the Dusky Bay Conference tournament and how crazy it was?
Well, I'm not going to tell any stories, but
okay.
I got a question since, Nate's throwing things out there at me.
Yeah.
Nate and I, here again, I recruited Nate. He wrestled for me. We coached together. We've had a great relationship. But if you ask me who the hardest kid I ever had to recruit was, it was Nathan Shear.
Really?
I couldn't get him to talk. I call him. Here again, no cell phones. You had to call him. You get him on the phone. And
he wasn't Bill then, you're saying, huh?
Well, if you got Bill, you were on the phone for 2 hours.
Yes, right.
I love Bill, but you were on the phone for 2 hours. You were another recruiting call that night. And you had a great conversation with him, but you just didn't get any calls made.
Right.
But, Bill, no trouble getting him to talk. Nathan, he was in high school. How you doing, Nathan? Good. You got a match this week? Yeah. Who you wrestling? Bellevue. Do you know who your opponent is? Yeah. Do you know his name? Yeah. I really thought that this kid's not interested in coming to Ohio to learn. He's, and then I get Bill on the phone and Bill, he loves your program, I'm like, until Nathan told me he was coming, I was like, I don't think they
didn't know.
Listen at all.
No, that's funny. He said SBC was, you guys went back and he said it was just nuts. You might not remember, but Nate said it was just one of those crazy SBC tournaments. And
those are always great tournaments.
Well, I don't know if you knew. So obviously back then it was only 8 teams, but and crazy. I could go on talking just the depth back then, but now it's NOL and SBC. I didn't know if you knew that. So it's tough as a district. Some state weights almost. Some
ways maybe harder.
yeah, and it's so that's a whole nother subject. So, you have any obviously a lot of people recommended to have you on here. Do you have any coaches that you recommend I have on here?
Well, most of them that came up or that were mentors to me are no longer coaching or alive.
Okay.
That's what I said. I go to national tournaments now, and the coaches that were mentors to me that I used to see.
Well, maybe someone you coached, maybe, or that's now a coach, or they can be at any level coaching. Do you have any wrestlers that you coached and now are coaching? That'd be a good show.
Boy, I don't know. You kind of stumped me. You asked me too quick.
Okay.
So I'll text you. I'm sure I'll think of something.
Okay. No, I appreciate it.
One, you got, I wouldn't hesitate to have a referee on the call.
Maybe. That's funny. I'm working on one right now.
It's just because here again, I got a great respect for referees and what they do.
Right.
I always have. And, I've been involved with, evaluating the referees and stuff like that too. And here again, they have an important job out there. And
right.
I think every coach should have to be a referee for, half a year before they coach. because you know what?
It's a different lens, right?
Walk in somebody else's shoes and see what it's like. And, I've always kind of seen that, but a couple years ago when I was doing video review for the Big Ten, and I was working an Ohio State match, and Ohio State challenged a call, and I ruled against them, and the crowd just started booing as soon as they announced it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, this is what it feels like to be a referee and make a call that they don't like.
Right.
And then later in the match, we had another one that went Ohio State's way, and they all cheered.
They're best friend now, right?
Yeah, and I think was the first time that I really was able to say and feel, all right, this is what a referee goes through. And here again, I just made 2 calls the whole night, not every call out there. But I think it'd be interesting to have referees to give their perspective of how they look at things, because being secretary rules editor and working with Bob Bubb and Pat McCormick, who I mentioned, who was a longtime national coordinator of officials, really taught me what to look for as an official. Okay? Coaches, you look at it through a coach's lens, but officials are looking at different things, different positioning, what constitutes the takedown, what constitutes control. Coaches, you just yell 2 because your guy's close to it.
Right.
But I think it makes you a better coach when you understand officiating.
It's easier to communicate with the official too, right? You're speaking their language sometimes, but
you can explain things to your wrestlers.
Right.
There'll be times in our room, our guys will be like, "Now, coach, explain why isn't this 2 or why is this 2 or why?" And I say, "Here's what the referee's looking for. You got to understand what they are looking for." I think that's an asset as a coach. So I really think, coaches, when I was secretary of rules editor, one thing I can tell you, 75% of the coaches don't know the rule book.
Right.
They do not know the rules. They think they know the rules. They don't know the rules. Okay.
Especially at the middle school and high school level, where you have this new coach coming in, right? They, you think, well, this is how it was when I wrestled, and it could be totally different, right?
But the collegiate level, to me, you're a college coach. This is your profession.
Right.
That, to me, not knowing the rules would be like working on Wall Street and not knowing the SEC rules of, trading and things that'll get you thrown in jail.
Right.
How do you not know the rules as a coach?
Right.
And I think I've learned that over the years. I've studied that rule book, and as secretary of rules editor, I think it gave me an advantage on the mat because I know the rules and I know how they're applied. And here again, I don't sit there and badger the official. I just say, that wasn't 2. Here's why. I've been known once or twice over the years to even quote the rule number and page number, and I've had officials go home and look it up. Call me the next day and said, "Hey, you had the page number right." I said,
yeah.
I mean, I don't say anything to official unless I know I'm right.
Right.
Otherwise, I keep quiet and I coach my kids. So, and I've had officials tell me they get nervous when I say something, because they say, you don't ever say anything, but when you do, you're right.
Yeah, right.
I can make them nervous once in a while. And I don't try to do that. I just let them know that isn't right. I want them to get better.
Right.
The official, they need to get better, just like the athletes and coaches. I want to get better as a coach. So I look at, and I've had conversations with officials afterwards. We talk about calls and positioning and stuff that, here's my perspective of it, and this is why I think you made the call right or wrong, or, we talk about it so everybody can get better. Not that I'm always right. I don't mean it that way, but you have a conversation with an official. There's no official out there trying to blow calls.
Screw your kid over for whatever reason. Right.
Just like I've never had a wrestler go out and try to lose a match either, but it happens. But how do you get better? You got to work at it.
Right. So, I have a few officials in mind, at the high school level I'd like to have on. But if you have any officials, college level, you think that'd be good on, shoot me a text, email.
Right.
Hey, this big guy'd be good, because that's definitely what
I recommend right now is Matt Sorenszinski, which he's done D1s the last couple of years. He was a D3 guy, wrestled at Ithaca College, national champ, and here again, he approaches officiating like he did a wrestler, getting better. You got to work at it. He watches film, probably watches more film as a referee than he did as an athlete. But that's what it takes to get to that national level. You got to attack it the same way as a wrestler trying to get to the national level. I mean, it's you
Just
just
like
don't.
any profession, you got to put the work in, right?
Yeah, you just don't show up to the match and blow the whistle. You're not going to be very good if that's what you do.
Yeah. You have anything else you want to share with us?
No, I've really enjoyed being on.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing. You know, I tried recruiting you and your brothers. I didn't get any of it. So I'm not going to hold that against you, but maybe
Well, thank you. Thank you for
got
not
some
holding
young,
that against.
you got some young ones coming up. So maybe if I make it long enough, I'll
Yeah.
try to get a second generation Opfer at least, maybe.
Yeah. I got a few nephews coming through. A couple of them are
Let me know if
wrestling.
if you want engineering, pharmacy, or something that I can get a little bit of an in on them.
There you go. Well, thanks for not holding that against me, but
No.
Thanks for your time tonight, Coach. I appreciate it.
I enjoyed being on. Thank you, Jared.